There is nothing wrong with you. Let me say that again. Nothing is broken. In a world that rewards loudness, speed, and self-promotion, the most sensitive people are often the most misunderstood. And many of them walk alone, not because they lack love, but because they feel too much of it. Empaths with few or no friends usually share a quiet truth. They learned early to listen more than they were listened to. From a young age, they became experts at reading the room, the sighs, the silences, the emotional weather others didn't notice, not because it was a gift at first, but because it was necessary. When connection feels uncertain, awareness becomes survival. You didn't wake up one day with heightened emotional awareness. You earned it. You learned it in rooms where moods shifted without warning, where silence could mean danger, where love felt conditional. You learned to notice the tightening of a jaw, the pause before a sentence, the emotional temperature before anyone spoke, not because you were curious, but because paying attention kept you safe. So when people call you too sensitive, understand this sensitivity was never weakness. It was intelligence under pressure. It was your nervous system adapting faster than the world around you. While others were free to be careless, you were alert. While others expressed freely, you calculated impact. You learned how to adjust your tone, your presence, your needs not to manipulate, but to survive emotional uncertainty. That level of awareness doesn't come from comfort. It comes from responsibility placed too early on a young heart. And now here you stand, able to sense undercurrents others miss. You feel tension before it erupts. You notice when energy changes. You recognize truth even when it's unspoken. This isn't magic. This is lived experience refined into perception. But here's the shift you must make. What once protected you should no longer imprison you. You are no longer required to scan every room for danger. You are no longer responsible for regulating other people's emotions. You do not have to earn safety through vigilance. That awareness you carry, it can now serve connection instead of defense. It can guide boundaries instead of self-erasure. It can help you choose environments that feel calm rather than familiar chaos. You survive by noticing everything. Now you get to live by choosing what deserves your attention. Your awareness is not a burden. It is a strength waiting for permission to rest. When you hear the word connection, your body doesn't immediately relax. It braces. Because connection for you has rarely been free. It has come with weight, expectations you didn't agree to, emotional labor you weren't trained for, responsibility that quietly became yours. You didn't just show up to relationships, you carried them. You learned that being close often meant being needed in ways that drained you. Listening without being heard. Supporting without being supported. Staying present even when you were exhausted. So your nervous system did the math long before your mind ever did and decided distance is safer than depletion. This is why invitations feel heavy. Why constant messaging feels intrusive. Why closeness sometimes triggers fatigue instead of warmth. Not because you are cold, but because your system remembers what closeness once cost you. You were valued for what you could absorb, not for who you were. Your empathy became a resource others drew from freely. And over time, connection stopped feeling mutual and started feeling transactional, so you adapted. You became selective. You withdrew not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect you learned the hard way. Now hear this clearly, the problem was never connection itself. It was unbalanced connection. You were taught to give without receiving, to stay without being held, to be strong without being seen. That teaches the body that intimacy equals loss of energy, and the body does not forget lessons learned through exhaustion. But you are allowed to relearn. You are allowed to experience relationships that don't ask you to disappear, conversations that don't require performance, presence that doesn't leave you empty afterward. Connection does not have to hurt to be real. It does not have to cost you your peace to be meaningful. You can choose bonds where your empathy is met, not mined, where closeness restores rather than consumes. You don't avoid people. You protect your life force. You walk into a room and you feel it immediately. Something is off. The smiles are practiced. The laughter arrives a second too late. The words sound right, but they don't land true. And your body tightens, not because you're judging, but because you're listening. You don't reject people. You reject masks. You've spent too much of your life sensing what was real beneath what was said to tolerate performances now. Polite dishonesty, forced positivity, emotional posturing, it registers in you like static. Others may overlook it. You can't. Your nervous system responds before your mind has time to explain. So when conversations stay shallow, when vulnerability is rushed or manipulated, when connection feels curated instead of lived, you disengage. Not dramatically, quietly, because pretending costs you more than solitude ever could. This is why small talk exhausts you when it's used to avoid truth. Why flattery feels uncomfortable. Why environments that reward image over integrity make you feel invisible. You're not difficult, you're aligned. You learned early what happens when truth is unsafe. You learned how damaging it is to deny what you feel just to keep the peace. And once you've paid that price, you stop participating in relationships that require self-betrayal as the entry fee. You don't crave perfection, you crave presence. You don't need people to have answers. You need them to be real. Honest pauses matter more to you than confident lies. Awkward truth feels safer than smooth deception. And here's the power in that. Your intolerance for inauthenticity is not rigidity, it's clarity. It protects your energy. It guides you toward spaces where your depth is welcome, not inconvenient. You are not meant to blend in. You are meant to recognize truth and stand with it. There comes a moment when the desire to belong is outweighed by the need to stay whole. You reach that moment not because you stopped caring, but because you cared long enough to notice the cost. You learned that fitting and sometimes required shrinking, softening your truth, laughing at what hurt, staying quiet when something inside you asked to speak. So you made a different choice. You stopped chasing rooms where your presence was tolerated but not welcomed. You stopped offering access to people who only wanted parts of you that were useful. You stopped bending yourself into versions that earned approval but lost integrity. That decision didn't come from fear, it came from wisdom. Self-protection is often misunderstood. It's labeled avoidance, coldness, distance. But for you, it is discernment. It is the recognition that connection without safety is not connection at all. That belonging that demands self-erasure is not belonging, it is submission. You know what it's like to stay too long, to give chances past exhaustion, to hope your patience would eventually be met. And when it wasn't, something inside you shifted. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped negotiating your boundaries. You chose peace even when it meant standing alone. And yes, that solitude can ache. But it is a clean ache. It doesn't come with confusion or regret. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth. It leaves you intact. You didn't close your heart. You guarded it. You are waiting for spaces where your truth does not require translation, where your presence does not feel like too much, where belonging does not ask for performance. Choosing yourself was not the easier path. It was the braver one, because it takes courage to walk away from conditional acceptance and trust that real connection will meet you without requiring your disappearance. You don't measure connection by numbers. You never have. A crowded room doesn't make you feel full, and a long contact list doesn't translate into closeness. What moves you is presence, the kind that settles, the kind that listens without rushing, the kind that allows silence to breathe. You're not built for surface exchange. Quick interactions, endless introductions, constant social motion, they skim past you without landing. Your system is tuned for something slower, richer, more intentional. You want conversations that change the air in the room, not just fill it with sound. This is why you can feel lonelier in a group than by yourself. Too many connections without substance create noise inside you. One genuine bond, however, can anchor you for months. That's not preference, that's design. You notice nuance. You care about meaning. You remember what people say because you're listening for who they are, not just what they offer. Depth requires emotional availability, and you don't give that casually. You invest it where there is mutual presence, curiosity, and respect. Quantity asks you to divide yourself. Depth asks you to arrive fully. And you refuse to fragment your attention just to appear connected. You would rather know a few people deeply than many people briefly. You would rather be understood by one than recognized by hundreds. The world often celebrates visibility, popularity, expansion. But your fulfillment comes from resonance, from feeling met, from moments where words are unnecessary because understanding is already there. You don't collect relationships, you cultivate them. And until that level of connection is available, you choose your own company without shame. Not because you lack desire, but because you value integrity in how you relate. When depth meets depth, you show up completely. You were never meant to spread yourself thin. You were meant to connect where it matters. The work is not to harden yourself. The work is to find spaces where your softness does not cost you yourself. And when that happens, when connection no longer requires you to disappear, you won't have many friends. You'll have real ones.